Have you ever wondered why the Heart Sutra seems to contradict the Buddha himself? Throughout his 45 years of teaching, the Buddha repeatedly emphasized dependent origination, the profound principle that explains how suffering begins and how it can come to an end. He described ignorance as the first cause in the chain of suffering and taught that when ignorance ends, liberation becomes possible. Yet in the Heart Sutra, Avalokiteshvara makes an astonishing declaration. There is no ignorance, no ending of ignorance, and so on, until there is no old age and death, and no ending of old age and death. How can this be? Is the Heart Sutra rejecting one of the Buddha's most important teachings? Has Mahayana Buddhism abandoned the doctrine of dependent origination? The answer is no. In fact, the Heart Sutra is not rejecting the Buddha's teaching, it is revealing its deepest meaning. Today, we will explore one of the most profound passages in the entire sutra and discover why understanding it can completely transform the way we see ourselves, our suffering, and the path to awakening. Imagine watching a movie in a cinema. As the story unfolds, you become completely absorbed. You laugh with the characters, grieve their losses, celebrate their victories, and perhaps even forget that you are sitting in a theater. The images on the screen seem so real that they stir genuine emotions. Yet, if you were to pause the film and examine a single frame, you would discover that the story itself does not exist in any one image. It only appears because thousands of individual frames arise in rapid succession, supported by light, a projector, electricity, a screen, and your own mind interpreting them as a continuous narrative. Remove any one of these conditions, and the movie disappears. The story is real as an experience, but it has no independent existence of its own. The Buddha taught that our lives unfold in much the same way. What we call self, our joys and sorrows, our hopes and fears, and even the suffering we experience do not arise independently. They are part of an ongoing stream of conditions, constantly changing and influencing one another. This profound insight is known as dependent origination, or pratitya samutpada. It is one of the most fundamental teachings in all of Buddhism. In fact, the Buddha declared that whoever sees dependent origination sees the Dharma, and whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. Yet when we arrive at the Heart Sutra, we encounter one of its most astonishing declarations. Avalokiteshvara says, "There is no ignorance, no ending of ignorance, and so on, until there is no old age and death, and no ending of old age and death." At first, these words can sound deeply confusing. Has the Heart Sutra abandoned one of the Buddha's central teachings? If ignorance is the very first link in dependent origination, why would Avalokiteshvara say there is no ignorance? If aging and death are experiences every human being encounters, how can the sutra declare that they do not exist? To understand this, we must first appreciate what dependent origination is actually describing. Dependent origination is the Buddha's explanation that nothing comes into existence by itself. Every event, every object, every thought, and every experience depends upon countless conditions. Nothing appears from a single cause, and nothing possesses an independent existence. Everything arises because other things support it. This truth is not limited to the physical world. It applies equally to our inner life. Our emotions, memories, desires, opinions, and even our sense of identity all arise because of countless causes and conditions. Anger does not suddenly appear without reason. It depends upon past experiences, expectations, physical sensations, habits of thinking, and present circumstances. Joy also depends upon conditions. Fear depends upon conditions. Even the feeling that there is a permanent I at the center of experience depends upon many changing physical and mental processes working together. To help us understand how suffering unfolds, the Buddha described a sequence known as the 12 links of dependent origination. These are not 12 isolated events, but 12 interconnected processes that continuously influence one another. The first link is ignorance. In Buddhism, ignorance does not simply mean lacking knowledge or education. It refers to a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. We mistakenly believe that things exist independently and permanently. We assume there is a solid, separate self that owns our experiences. We believe lasting happiness can be found by holding on to things that are constantly changing. From this misunderstanding arise volitional formations, our intentional actions, habits, reactions, and karmic tendencies. Every choice we make leaves subtle impressions that shape future experiences. These formations condition consciousness, the continuous stream of awareness that is influenced by everything that has come before. Consciousness gives rise to what Buddhism calls name and form, the inseparable combination of our mental and physical existence. Mind and body develop together, constantly affecting one another. From name and form arise the 6 sense bases, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Through these 6 faculties we encounter the world. When the senses meet their respective objects, contact occurs. Contact gives rise to feeling, which may be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Feeling naturally leads to craving. We seek pleasant experiences, avoid unpleasant ones, and overlook neutral ones. Craving gradually becomes clinging. We begin attaching ourselves not only to possessions, but also to opinions, relationships, identities, achievements, and even our spiritual understanding. Clinging conditions becoming. Through repeated habits of attachment, we continually shape future patterns of existence. Becoming gives rise to birth. This is not only physical birth into a new life, it also describes how new identities are constantly being born within us. In one moment we become the offended person, in another the successful person, then the anxious person, the loving parent, the disappointed friend. The mind continuously creates new versions of itself. Finally, every birth leads to old age and death. Everything that comes into existence eventually changes, declines, and passes away. Every identity dissolves. Every experience ends. Although these 12 links are often explained across lifetimes, they can also be observed unfolding many times during a single day. One careless remark from another person can trigger misunderstanding, emotional reaction, craving, attachment, and the birth of a wounded identity within moments. For this reason, Buddhist practitioners have reflected upon these 12 links for over 2,000 years. They reveal how suffering is created, and more importantly, how it can come to an end. So why does the Heart Sutra declare that there is no ignorance, no ending of ignorance, no old age and death, and no ending of old age and death? The answer lies in understanding the difference between conventional truth and ultimate truth. On the conventional level, dependent origination functions exactly as the Buddha described. Causes produce effects. Karma operates. Our actions have consequences. Ignorance gives rise to suffering, while wisdom leads toward liberation. Nothing in the Heart Sutra denies this practical reality. Instead, the sutra invites us to investigate these very links more deeply. If ignorance truly exists, where can it be found? Can we isolate it and hold it in our hand? Can we point to something that exists permanently as ignorance? When we examine carefully, we discover that ignorance itself depends upon countless conditions. It arises, changes, weakens, strengthens, and eventually disappears. It has no fixed essence of its own. The same is true of craving. At one moment, desire feels overwhelming. Hours later, it has faded entirely, replaced by another emotion or another thought. What seems solid was actually changing from moment to moment. The same is true of old age and death. Aging certainly occurs, but it cannot exist independently. Aging depends upon a living body. The body depends upon food, water, air, countless biological processes, parents, and an entire universe of supporting conditions. Remove those conditions, and aging cannot even be spoken of. Every one of the 12 links exists only because every other condition supports it. None stands alone. None possesses an independent nature. This is precisely what Avalokiteshvara means by saying, there is no ignorance. He is not denying that ignorance appears. He is revealing that ignorance is empty of inherent existence. The same is true of every other link in the chain. Consider again the movie we imagined at the beginning. When you are watching it, the characters seem alive. You may even cry when one of them dies. Yet where exactly is that character? Is the character inside the projector? On the screen? In a single frame of film? In the beam of light? None of these alone contains the character. The character exists only because many conditions come together in a particular way. Our suffering is much like that movie. It appears, It affects us deeply. Yet when we examine it carefully, we cannot find a solid, independent entity that exists by itself. It depends upon countless changing conditions. This insight prevents us from turning even the Buddha's teachings into something rigid. Dependent origination itself is a teaching that points toward reality. It is not an independent object to cling to. The Buddha compared his teachings to a raft used to cross a river. Once the far shore has been reached, the raft has served its purpose. We do not continue carrying it on our backs. In the same way, dependent origination guides us toward wisdom. The Heart Sutra then reveals that even this teaching is itself dependently arisen and empty of fixed existence. This is also why Avalokiteshvara says there is no ending of ignorance. If ignorance never possessed an independent essence, then enlightenment is not the destruction of some permanent thing called ignorance. Rather, awakening is the direct recognition that ignorance was never as solid or independent as we imagined. Nothing substantial has to be destroyed. Only misunderstanding comes to an end. This understanding protects us from falling into nihilism. Some people mistakenly hear the words, "there is no ignorance," and conclude that nothing matters. But this is not the teaching of the Heart Sutra. Because everything is interconnected, every action matters profoundly. A single act of kindness can transform another person's day. One compassionate conversation can change the direction of someone's life. A harmful word can leave deep emotional wounds. Karma continues to function precisely because everything depends upon conditions. In fact, if things possessed permanent, fixed essences, genuine transformation would be impossible. Healing could never occur. Growth would be impossible. Liberation could never happen. It is precisely because everything is empty of fixed existence that change is possible. Suffering can cease. Wisdom can grow. Compassion can deepen. The Heart Sutra therefore does not reject dependent origination. Instead, it reveals its deepest meaning. Dependent origination explains how suffering arises through conditions. Emptiness reveals that those very conditions lack any permanent independent essence. These are not opposing teachings, they complete one another. As your meditation matures, you may begin observing this process directly. Someone criticizes you, and irritation begins to arise. Notice how a simple sound becomes perception. Perception becomes feeling. Feeling becomes craving for things to be different. Craving becomes resistance. Resistance gives birth to a new identity. I have been insulted. Then look even more carefully. Where is this solid person who has been insulted? Where is the permanent anger? Where is the fixed self that owns this experience? Each dissolves into changing thoughts, sensations, memories, expectations, and conditions. This is where dependent origination and emptiness meet. The process continues to function, but the illusion of solidity begins to dissolve. The Heart Sutra invites us into this liberating vision. It does not ask us to deny the reality of suffering, nor does it dismiss the Buddha's earlier teachings. Instead, it encourages us to see more deeply. Ignorance, craving, birth, aging, and death all arise through conditions. Because they arise through conditions, they are empty of independent existence. And because they are empty, freedom is possible. When this wisdom is realized, the chain that once bound us becomes the very path that leads us beyond suffering, toward the boundless compassion and freedom of awakening. As we come to the end of this lesson, remember that the Heart Sutra is not asking us to deny the reality of life. It is asking us to look more deeply into it. Ignorance arises, but it is not permanent. Craving arises, but it has no fixed essence. Birth, aging, and death unfold according to causes and conditions, yet none of them exists independently. When Avalokiteshvara declares, "There is no ignorance and no ending of ignorance," he is not erasing the Buddha's teaching. He is inviting us to see beyond appearances and recognize the empty, interdependent nature of all phenomena. This insight does not make life meaningless. It makes liberation possible. Because suffering is conditioned, it can cease. Because the self is not fixed, transformation is possible. Because all things are empty of inherent existence, wisdom and compassion can continually grow. In our next lesson, we will explore the profound relationship between dependent origination and emptiness. Far from contradicting one another, these two teachings illuminate the same reality from different perspectives. We will discover how emptiness does not negate dependent origination, but reveals its deepest meaning, showing that because all phenomena arise through causes and conditions, they are empty of inherent existence. Understanding this unity is one of the greatest insights of Mahayana Buddhism and a key to unlocking the true wisdom of the Heart Sutra. Until then, may your study of the Heart Sutra continue to deepen your wisdom, soften your heart, and bring you ever closer to the freedom that lies beyond clinging and fear.